Thank you everybody for joining us. I am here with Wesley Schook, Eric Hinman. My name is Joshua Murillo. We're going to wait a couple minutes to let a couple people trickle in. While we're waiting, go ahead and jump in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from. But yeah, we want to thank you guys for joining us for sure. My name's Josh. I am a stunt performer. I am a trainer. I train actors, athletes, directors, producers, musicians, you name it, all that stuff. So yeah, I've been doing that for a number of years. I'm a CSCS, and yeah, basically that's what I do. But yeah, I'd like to introduce Wesley Schook. He's a nurse practitioner. Wes, you want to tell him a little bit about yourself?
Yep. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, nurse practitioner. Got my doctorate from Creighton 2020. Been involved in nursing as a nurse before that. Registered nurse for about 13 years. And then about probably 9 years of hormone experience. I was an athlete all through high school. I played hockey in college. Um, Being from Michigan, that's what most of us did. And then played a short stint in single A professional before I switched actually into the healthcare field.
Awesome. Very cool. We also have Eric Hinman here. Eric, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
You bet. Hey guys, Eric Hinman. I live in Denver, Colorado. I love to work out, and I've done a bunch of Ironmans, high rocks races, competed in CrossFit at an amateur level, and an entrepreneur. Work with quite a few wellness brands, invest in wellness brands, and like to be outside for most of the day.
Awesome. Very cool. So we're going to give everybody a chance to kind of ask questions regarding optimization, health tips, training tips, all that stuff towards the end. Basically, what we're going to be talking about today is a principle that I've kind of adopted over a number of years and something that's really benefited me in my career. And that's the 70 to 100 principle. All right. So we'll get into that. I'm going to tell some stories and stuff. Promise we'll circle it all back around, tie it together in a bow at the end. But yeah, just basically to give you a little bit about myself. I'm from Yakima, Washington. I've been playing in sports my entire life. I started playing baseball at a very young age, started boxing at a very young age, and basically did that all the way through college. Yeah, I basically something that was really I picked up from a young age is that I was pretty gifted in baseball, and that kind of set the stage for the next couple of years. And basically, when I got good in high school, I realized I don't really have to practice that much, and I really don't have to put in the extra time in order to excel. And so I kind of rode that wave past high school, and then when I wanted to get into a decent college, I basically, played at a CC for a couple of years, showed everybody what I could do, and then went on to play at Central Washington University. Now, the things that I really enjoyed about baseball were, spending time with my dad. When I look back on memories of spending time with my dad, those are the best things I really remember about playing baseball. And when I think about the experience of playing high school, college, all that stuff, and my baseball career as a whole, I'm left with a certain amount of regret. And that regret's something that I later on in life had corrected in my professional career and allowed me to really flourish when I learned from those experiences. So, a little bit about Central Washington University. It's in Ellensburg, Washington. It's a D2. And at the time, I was playing outfield, and I was a leadoff hitter. I was a quick guy, that kind of thing. But I kind of knew that there was not really going to be a whole lot after I played baseball at Central. There are some guys that were going to go on to play pro and things like that. And I just kind of didn't feel like I had what it took to make it to the next level. And because of that, I didn't really put in the effort. And I think that's where most of the sting really comes from. So, um, it comes from two things. Number one would be at the time, I kind of didn't know what I didn't know. Looking back now that I've learned a lot about strength and conditioning, nutrition, recovery, all that stuff, I realized that there's a lot that was left on the table. And when I was training at Central, there was a strength and conditioning coach. I remember going in one time and being like, "Hey, what should we be doing right now?" And he was just like, "Oh, what position you play?" And I was like, "Well, I'm a leadoff hitter, and I play the outfield." And he was like, "Oh, you're fast, so don't worry about the weights. Like, go ahead and just do some sprints and stuff, and you should be good." And then kind of turned his attention to the bigger guys, or the faster, not the faster guys, but more like three, four, five hitters, or the guys that were supposed to knock me in. So my job was to get on base, that kind of thing. So I went throughout college thinking, oh, well, I just have to like be fast and put the bat on the ball, get on base somehow, and then they'll knock me in. And I'll get to this later, but basically, I did not know the benefits of lifting weights for someone that was supposed to be fast and trying to steal bases and doing all of those things. So I kind of didn't know what I didn't know at the time. But the biggest thing that really, really stings when I think about my experience playing baseball is just the lack of effort. And I think the lack of effort came from not understanding what was possible for me. I didn't have it in my head that I could play at a higher level because no one really articulated that. And because I was kind of limited in my knowledge, or the people around me were limited in their knowledge on how to develop an athlete like myself to get to the next level, I just didn't think it was a possibility. So I was like, I'm not going to go in and do all the extra T work. The guys that went on, the guys that went to get drafted or play pro, things like that, they were getting in the extra T work. They were swinging a bat in front of the mirror. They would, during BP, when we were shagging baseballs out in the outfield, those were the guys that were playing their position. And every time someone was just getting tossed a pitch by the coach, they would play it like it was a real game. And I was just kind of shagging the balls and throwing them in and all that stuff. And so that was kind of how I went about doing a lot of stuff. I graduated from college with like a 3.0 because I was like, I'm an okay student. I'm just not great at school. It's just something that I'm, whatever, neither here nor there for me. And so, yeah, that's just kind of how I was living life. I got done with that, finished with a degree in business, like business administration, education, or management and all that stuff, and got a job working at a fruit warehouse in Yakima, Washington. So for those of you guys that aren't familiar with Washington State, if someone's from Washington State, shout out Washington State. But yeah, there's a lot of fruit there. So I got a job at one of the local warehouses doing quality control for Yakima Fresh. And so anyway, so I'm working there, and at the same time, I had been into music and playing instruments, and being creative is something I've always been really interested in. So I was writing music at the time, and I was like, God, I would really love to be able to work in the entertainment business. This is something I've always kind of like looked to, watching movies or whatever, and being kind of enthralled by that. A really good example of that, I'll circle back to this, but basically when I was watching the movie 300 and I saw these guys that were just absolutely peeled from head to toe. And I remember watching the behind the scenes DVD. I had it on repeat, and I thought it was just so cool, those guys prepping for film. And later on, little did I know that later on in life, I would actually be the one doing that. But there was a coach there, and he was just like, yeah, it was his job to write the programs. It was his job to, tell the guys what to do, keep them on track, all that stuff. And he was responsible for making sure they looked super sharp on camera. And I always thought that was the craziest thing, and thinking, how do you get this job? How do you do this? Like, I have no idea what the pathway would be to get there. But the entertainment business is something I always was drawn to. And at the time, I played 6 or 7 instruments, and I was like, I'll go into music. That'll be something I'll be really interested in. So I ended up telling the job I was at, hey, I'm going to kind of like divert here and go to audio school in Arizona. Thank you very much. And anyway, headed to Arizona, and I got a degree in audio engineering there. Now, the thing that I realized over a short period of time is that, like, as I started going through audio school, my grades were really good. And I realized that the only difference, it was not that I suddenly became smarter or anything like that, is that I was very interested and motivated to learn what I was learning. And I had a really interesting paradigm shift there, to where I'm like, oh, wait, maybe I can be a good student. Maybe I can learn things fairly quickly if I just really, really try and learn how to learn. So yeah, that was something that really, really made a big impact for me. I ended up graduating from that audio school with a 4.0 at the top of my class and surprised myself there. And it got me thinking a little bit bigger. Now, when I got done with there, I was fortunate enough to get an internship at NBC Universal Sports. So that's in Los Angeles. And at the time, they were mixing things like the Olympics, World Championships for figure skating, rugby, all that stuff. So all the Olympic sports that channel was responsible for. And when I got there, I realized that was a pretty big opportunity and started working for them. And that was great. That lasted about 6 months or so. And then basically the channel itself moved to Denver because that's where the Olympic Training Center was. So it became the Olympic Channel and left Los Angeles. So at the time, I ended up just working for a post-production house. That's all that was available to someone with very little experience in the real entertainment business. But I was excited because I'm in LA. I'm starting to work on things like TV, which I was very fired up about. And so I'm just like delivering tapes all throughout LA. And then I eventually was able to work in the audio room for a local post-production house. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with how TV used to work. Now it's a little bit different because of the digital and everything like that. But at the time, my job was basically inserting silence during commercial breaks, and I had to sit there and sit in silence, stop, insert silence, stop, insert silence, stop. So you can imagine how monotonous that became. From there, at the time I was going to the gym, and I got really, really into training. And something kind of clicked when I was going to the gym. I started going to a CrossFit gym in 2011, and things I didn't know how to do were like back squat, press, clean and jerk, snatch, all these things that I had never done in my athletic career, all the way through D2 college. And now I'm learning these things and starting to become really strong. And something clicked in my head, and I was like, dude, like maybe if I had learned this stuff back then, I would have seen a possibility of possibly going pro. And maybe I would have tried a little bit harder, done that. And that just kind of, it really made the sting of regret pushed me to continue learning more and more and more about training. And it really, really lit a fire as far as wanting to know as much as I possibly could about training protocols, nutrition, kind of like the bedside manner of coaching athletes and making sure that they're set up for success during competition, all of that stuff. So I loved it so much. I quit my job working at the post-production house, worked full-time at the gym, became the manager there. And I was kind of like having a great time living life, training, met my wife there, right? So the way things kind of escalated from there is that I was training a number of stunt professionals. And so stunts for film and TV, like falling down, getting hurt, all that stuff, or trying not to get hurt, but you get the idea. Anyway, so these guys would come in, they would train with me. Things would go pretty well just because of my athletic background. And then they would, be familiar with the fact that I used to box for a number of years and encourage me, hey, you should try getting into stunts. You'd be pretty good at this. And of course I'm thinking back to the 300 stuff and being like, dude, yeah, like, how do I do that? So I started auditioning for things here and there, just kind of get small roles, like just falling down, worked on a couple TV shows here and there. And then my wife encouraged me to go to an audition for a touring stunt show called Marvel Universe Live. And I had been trying to figure out for a long time, how do I turn stunts into a full-time job? Because it was like one gig every month or one gig every 6 to 8 weeks. And you get paid a little bit, and then it's just like, all right, back to zero. And now I don't know what to do. So this was a live show touring the entire world, and it went on 1-year contracts. And I was like, this is it. And this is something that I really want to do. It will get me from A to B. And what I realized at that time was that the possibility of being a stuntman, being the person that I want to become, was enough to get me to go above and beyond. A great example of that was they told me like, hey, they're really interested in you. Your audition went great, but they're looking for someone with stilts. And so what I ended up doing was I was like, hold that thought. I went and bought jumping stilts, which I'd never been on ever, had them overnighted to me. And I put on the stilts. I called all of my buddies that were in the stunt business and I was like, hey, I need to be able to walk on stilts and I need to be able to do it tomorrow. Who do you know in town that can use these stilts? I got one number. Thankfully, the guy picked up. I go, hey, what's up, man? I'll pay you $50 if you meet me at the park in 2 hours. He ended up doing it, taught me the basics. I practiced for a day, and then the next day I had my wife come out and film me. And I'm like falling down in the stilts, I'm walking, I'm dancing, like all that stuff. And I cut that together and sent them in. And basically, what I was trying to convince them of was, look, I see what's possible. I'm willing to do what's necessary here to get better and learn and become this guy. And thankfully enough, they were willing to take a chance on me. I got hired to be a backup for the Incredible Hulk, which was the character that was on the stills. He's like 10 foot tall in an animatronic suit. So my job was the understudy and then being a bunch of bad guys. So when I went to, so I ended up proposing to my wife and went on tour. We're in the rehearsal process and I get there and I'm looking around at everybody there. And there's dancers and acrobats and martial artists and you name it, there's all these people with all these crazy skills. And all I could do was fall down and be fitness guy. And I'm like, how does this apply on stage? Like, I don't know how I can stand out. And I started thinking about what had happened with baseball, about being like, oh, well, this guy can run faster. This guy, he can hit harder, like all that stuff. Like, I'm not going to do the T work. I'm not going to go in early. I'm not going to take extra soft toss, anything like that. And I remembered how that went. That was me giving less than full effort. And so when I was presented with this opportunity and feeling a little bit inferior, just feeling like all I have is fitness, I was like, I'm going to just assess the situation and do what I can do to the best of my abilities. So because I was the understudy for the Hulk, they gave me a frame and they were like, hey, practice in this. When we get the full suit up and running, we will kind of get you, we'll get you in there. You can get you some practice just in case he's sick or whatever. And I go, okay, cool. So I noticed that the other performers, not all of them, but I would say a chunk, when they weren't rehearsing, they would go to the green room and they would sit around and they would just be hanging out and they wouldn't really put in the extra work. They weren't going above and beyond. And I was like, when they're in the green room, I'm going to be in that suit. And so I'm sitting there in the suit day after day after day. And eventually it got so easy and I can maneuver well enough in it that I started putting weights on. And I'd walk around with a vest, weighted arms, weighted legs, all that stuff. And I ended up getting so good with that that I could start running with the weights on and everything like that. So eventually the suit was ready to go and it was being made available for the main guy to use. And the producer, the director, stunt coordinator, they're all backstage and they're like, okay, let's get in the suit, go for it. So the guy gets in the suit, stands up, and he goes, does a couple moves here and there. And basically what happened was he was kind of looking a little clunky, all of that. He sits back down. They're like, what adjustments do we need to make the suit? He gave him some notes, all that stuff. He walks out, all that stuff. And the director goes, hey, do you want to get some practice in the suit? And I go, yeah, sure. So I hop in there and strap in and I stand up. And I had been so used to the weight of that suit being like 300 to 400 pounds that when I stood up, I was like, oh, this is light. And so I start moving around. I'm doing like my roar, all that stuff. I'm like smashing things like the Hulk does, all that. Get out of the suit. And about 30 minutes later, all three of them come up to me and they're like, do you want to be the Hulk? And I go, yeah. And they're like, okay, if you want the job, it's yours. And that was because I had remembered what 70% effort felt like. And I was like, I'm not letting that happen again. And having given 100% effort and doing all the little things along the way, I reached this new outcome. So that went really well. They eventually asked me to be the performance captain of that show. And I did that for 3 years. Did like 500 shows, all that stuff. My wife and I decided to do stunts in Los Angeles, and we went back and tried our hand at film and TV. And so at the time, all the way through this, because I was so enthralled with strength and conditioning, I was learning and learning and learning and programming for people and writing programs and working with athletes the entire time and working with the athletes on the tour to help them be prepared to perform. So I get back to LA. We're gigging here and there, coaching, mostly coaching, doing live shows. And then every now and then TV shows would pop up and I just do those. And I ended up getting a notice from a friend of mine that was like, "Hey, they're looking for this coordinator is looking for a trainer to train actors, and they need someone that can work with a young actor." So I ended up throwing my name in the ring, and I got a phone call, and it was for Avatar. And so I went through the process, had like a million meetings, and everybody in the stunt world had known that basically I can program and do all this stuff, and I do stunts, and that's how they knew about me. So thankfully, I had a lot of people vouching for me. And if you're listening to this and you did that, thank you very much. But yeah, went through the whole thing. I want to say 4 or 5 meetings. Eventually met James Cameron, explained to him what I would do to prepare a character who's like 13 years old to look like Tarzan by the time we're ready to shoot. And I laid out the entire thing, and he seemed to like it. And so I ended up getting hired. I trained Jack Champion from 2018 until just this past year when we wrapped up. Um, and it was an amazing experience. I went to New Zealand for that. And the main thing that I had realized was in the past, when I had given 70% or only gone 70%'s worth of what I could have done, I only obviously get 70% results. And when I ended up going to New Zealand, that was a really big turning point for me because in the past, sometimes, and in everyday life, some of you guys might be able to relate to this, where you don't really see an opportunity when it presents itself. I was lucky enough in this case to be presented with this job. This is the only character that wasn't a blue person in Avatar, and I need to get this guy ready to be on camera. And I was like, this is it. Like, I don't think I can say this now. Like, I probably will not work on a movie that is bigger in budget than this. And it's one of the highest grossing films of all time. And so I saw the task ahead of me and how difficult that was going to be. And Jack is an amazing guy, and he worked his ass off and stuff, but I'm sorry, his butt off. And he, but he was 13 years old. And so the challenges were there. And the main thing that I started thinking to myself as we're ramping up towards production was that could be the biggest opportunity of my life. And I don't know if I'm going to get another job after this. I don't know what's going to happen after this. It could just all go away. And him and I were training in Virginia. And this is right after COVID just popped off. Or sorry, this is just before COVID popped off. And so it's 2019. We're prepping all that stuff. And I know early in 2020, we're about to go to New Zealand, and he's going to have to be walking around in a loincloth the whole time. And he's got to be ripped the whole time. And so I had a really interesting epiphany. Now, when I was in college, I partied pretty hard. Comment in the chat if you partied as well. It's okay. Basically, what I just kind of let it ride, kind of through college. It was a nice social lubricant as I'm meeting stunt guys. I like to have a good time. I'm my family. I'm Hispanic. Like my family, having a good time, like partying, barbecues, get-togethers, all that stuff. It's a big part of our culture and everything. And it's just something that I had done for most of my life. And I kind of kept that train running. And I got to a point at the end of 2019 where I woke up one day and I walked outside of the place I was staying. And I thought to myself, and this is kind of like, I read this quote from Seneca. And basically what the quote says is, while you wait for the perfect moment to become who you're meant to be, life slips away and regret takes its place. And I read that on my phone and I stared out at the hills in Virginia. And I was like, this is the moment. And I was like, there's two ways that can go. And there's two guys that could exist. One of them is Josh having realized 100% of his potential. The other is 70% of what Josh could have been. And I was like, I'm training a 13-year-old. I don't want to show up late for work once. I don't want to be tired. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm going out with the boys or anything like that. If he's stressed out about filming and wants to talk at like 8:30 p.m., 9 p.m., whatever it is, I want to be available, ready to go so that I can crush it at every single turn. And I was like, there's no way 100% Josh is ever going to exist if I keep drinking. So on December 14th, 2019, the other thing, I just had a feeling too. I was like, there's something that's gonna, I don't know. I just got a feeling that 2020, something important is gonna happen, like who knew the whole world was gonna shut down and go up in flames. But yeah, anyway, so I just had the gut feeling. I was like, this is when I do it. This is so I decided, I was like, I've done sober October a couple times. I'm gonna go a year. Okay. For all of 2020, I'm not gonna drink. That's gonna be my thing. And then if I get to the end of 2020, I can have a beer. It's gonna be great. And so I quit then and basically got a running start into 2020. And I ended up lasting the year, and production went great. Like, it was the hardest job I've ever had in my entire life, and probably will be the hardest job. It was so difficult, but I was ready for it. I rose to the occasion. I stayed late. I showed up early. I did all the things that I hope that 100% potential Josh would do. Uh, and it was because I was willing to kind of recognize the opportunity that was ahead of me. Um, so that went very well. Avatar ended. We got back to LA, and I was like, well, that's it. And I started getting phone calls from other production companies, other actors, other directors, things like that. Hey, can you train me for this? Hey, can you do that? And it had been because I had gone above and beyond during Avatar that I was getting recommended to others. And so that's kind of been um, the way things have gone. But what I did was I took that mindset and started applying it to other elements in my life, because I realized in health that once I stopped drinking, it didn't happen right away. About 4 months into it, I was like, dude, I'm sleeping better. Like, my skin is getting more clear. My hair's not falling out, things like that. And I was like, here I am thinking like, I don't really drink that much, that kind of thing. But me going from 70% on point to 100% on point made that difference. And just being like, I'm committing 70% committed to 100% committed. That's the guy I'm going to be, you know? Um, so I started relating it to other things in my health, things like training, diet, optimization. And I applied this to my coaching as well. So there's three things that I want you guys to start thinking about regarding those three items: training, diet, optimization. And that is assessing what's going on, educating yourself on what to do or who to learn it from, and then execution, right? So in training, this is a perfect example. If I had gone back to Josh that was playing baseball, the first thing I would have done is assess, okay, what would make you a better baseball player? What would, and you can apply this to other things as well. Like, Eric, I'll ask you this question, man. Like, so, if you had someone who, came to you and was like, hey, I want to run a faster high rocks, what is the first question you would ask them? Like, do you want to, they want to PR their high rocks time. What's the first question you would ask them?
What's your current high rocks time and how are you training?
My man, there we go. Perfect answer. That's exactly what I was looking for. Um, so yeah, exactly what Eric just said is the assessment. Like, where are you currently at, right? The second thing you would need to do is assess what needs to be done from here to get me to PR my high rocks time, right? And the third thing is, once someone like Eric lays it all out for you, aggressive execution. And I say aggressive execution because there's a difference. I'm sure you guys, show me a hand in the comments if you've done this before, where you're like, hey, I need you to call this person and get them to order so and so, right? And so you called the person, but they didn't pick up, so you left a message. That's not a completed task, right? Aggressive execution means I am making sure that that's done completely, and then the box is checked off. And I think a lot of times in training or in nutrition or things like that, we think of execution as in like, well, I'd put forth effort, but it's like there's putting forth effort and then there's doing the thing completely, you know? So that's what I mean by aggressive execution. You can do that in training by assessing the areas that you want to improve, educating yourself on what you need to do, or finding someone that can guide you through that, and then aggressively executing it and taking massive action. In your diet, the same thing applies, right? So the first question I would ask is if you wanted to lose weight or put on muscle or something like that, the first question I'd ask is, do you even know what you're eating? Do you track your food? Do you like first give me a week's worth of what you're eating down to the detail, and then we can make changes from there. From there, uh, either them or if they're reaching out to me, then you basically would look at areas, the lowest hanging fruit, what are incremental changes that we can make periodically over time to get you to where you want to go. And then you have to do it. You know what I'm saying? You have to take action. I can give you all the information. I can give you the means to do it and everything like that. But in the end, it's going to take you wanting to become that person that has lost weight or put on muscle, right? As I got older, I realized that optimizing what's going on internally was also a factor. And so the very first step, and I know Wes and Wes, what is the first thing that you need in order to make any sort of suggestions or changes or help anybody in any way in the optimization field?
Yeah, first I need to know habits, health history,
Yeah.
and then I need to know labs too to see. I need
Yeah.
to see physiological baseline.
Yeah, awesome. And that was something that I had been neglecting. A lot of the things that you just mentioned, either health history, I just kind of disregarded because I was like, dude, I used to like drive forklift and like, like if I feel sick or if I feel so, tired or whatever, I'm just like, I'll just work through it, like whatever. And it's not something that I really took seriously. And especially since I'd been working out a lot and eating fairly healthy, and I was like, well, I don't really drink anymore and stuff like that. I was like, I'm good. Like internally, I'll be good. And then I got my labs done, and I didn't realize I was like, oh man, like I actually have some liver issues from partying in college and afterwards and all that stuff. I had just some leftover issues with that I had to address, but I never would have known that if I had not assessed the situation. Um, and thankfully for Blokes, it's really helped me out to be like, okay, I didn't, first of all, I didn't even know this was a problem, and I wouldn't have known about that unless I had peeked under the hood. And now I'm like, look, I'm a strength coach. I do nutrition stuff, but like I don't know what to do about blood work, that kind of thing. And thankfully, uh, thanks to people like Wes, like spelling it out, like here's what you need to supplement with. Here are your options. Here are the reasons why you might be feeling all these different things. Some of them lifestyle wise, some of them hormonally, some of them just based on genetics. But I needed that education in order to take massive action and start feeling better and optimizing, right? So all three of those things are important if I want to reach 100% Josh when I'm 45. And the reason for that is they always say this like, hey, if you want to take care of others or be a leader or things like that, it's kind of like you need to put your own air mask on first for the airplane. You need to make sure you're good because if you're not as effective as you want to be, then you're not going to get the job done. So that was the massive importance for me. So to kind of circle this back around, the two things that made me regret my baseball career and how it ended were the lack of knowledge and the lack of training protocols, what to do, and then actually going out and do it. And the second thing was the idea of what's possible and then working to either make something like that happen or make something that I didn't want to happen, prevent that. And so I think this applies to a lot of guys that might be watching this. There's two things that you would need to do, right? Uh, when you guys are structuring your life and you're like, should I take action or check all these boxes, eat a cleaner diet, train, all that stuff, it requires a certain amount of inspiration, right? And I think when you're trying to figure out what is going to motivate you to reach 100% guy? Here are a couple tips. The first is when you're finding something to be fired up about that'll get you to do all of that, are you relying on motivation or are you relying on discipline? And I'm sure you guys have probably heard this before, but motivation is fleeting. It comes and it goes based on circumstances, environment, different things change all the time. Uh, Discipline is something where you do it because it's the thing you do, and you've decided to do it, make that the thing you do because of a very important reason. So if you guys are listening to this right now, I want you to think, you don't have to vocalize or anything like that. Um, what would you guys say? Actually, let's go ahead and put in the chat here. What are things that you guys think would motivate someone to take massive action for anything? Okay. In this case, we're talking about health, but I'll give you a good example. The first one for me would be, personally, there's been times in my life where I didn't give full effort, or I didn't rise to the occasion, and I lost out on opportunities. Let's say I couldn't do a certain acrobatic move, and so they hired another guy to do the stunt. That's me not, you can look at it like, oh, the guy was, he can do the flips and all that stuff. And I'm like, why can't I do the flips? It's because I didn't practice. I didn't do that. I didn't put in the work. And so failure can be a very, very important motivator. And as you guys are trying to figure this out for yourself, what is it that's going to motivate you and fire you up? It needs to be something primal, something that either hurts really bad or feels really good. All right. The second thing for me would be something like competitiveness. When I saw the opportunity for Avatar, I saw, dude, what happens if I crush this? There's a carrot on the end of that stick and I really want that carrot, but it's going to take so much work and a lot of discomfort and a lot of sleepless nights, time away from my wife, all of that stuff in order to get what I want. And so that's another really big motivator. A couple others that you guys might work out for you. I used to sell gym memberships. There's a guy who came in one time and he goes, "Hey, what's up, man? How's it going?" I was like, "Hey, what brings you to the gym?" He's like, I want to get ripped. And I go, "Cool. How come you want to get ripped?" And he goes, beach season's coming up. I want to be shredded, hit the beach. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome." And I go, "Well, why do you want to be shredded for the beach?" And he's like, "Because chicks are there." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. Awesome." So then I go, "Did you have a girlfriend?" He's like, "No, I mean, that's why I'm going for the chicks, that kind of thing." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." So we kept peeling that onion back. And throughout conversation, we actually landed on, you didn't walk into the gym because you want to get ripped. You walked into the gym because you're lonely and you are looking for someone to actually date. This guy was ready for a relationship, took a little prodding, but yeah. And basically he signed up for the gym, and he stayed for a very long time, not because he wanted to get ripped, because he was like, I know my chances of finding the one are going to go up if I'm ripped. And so that was what kept him coming back. A couple other things, and we'll move on real quick. So loss of opportunity, loss of functionality. And this one's a little bit for the older guys. So it's like, when you look ahead, let's say you're 45, right? And let's say you got kids. My daughter's 2. When she is ready to get married, I mean, that's 28 years from now. So do I want to be able to throw a football when I have grandkids? Do I want to be able to run around, chase them around? Am I going to have the energy to do that? Do I want to be around to even see them? Those are really important things for me. And so I need to make sure that I'm dialed in my training. I need to make sure that I'm working out consistently and I'm eating nutritious food. I also need to make sure there's nothing going on under the hood that I'm not aware about. And those 3 things are going to get me to that finish line. It's a huge motivator for me right now, to where I'm like, when I have grandkids and she is, or she's walking down the aisle, I will be there and I will be able to enjoy it. And she's going to be able to enjoy 100% Josh, not the guy who's just kind of like, needs a cane or, needs help, that kind of stuff. I don't want that to be me. And so I'm doing what I have to do now and finding out what I have to find out now in order to make those things a reality. So yeah, basically, that is my call to action for you guys. Looking ahead, whether it's you wanting to seize an opportunity, whether it's you wanting to experience a memory, whether it's you trying to avoid illness or pain or discomfort or anything like that, there is a version of you that will be living up to 100% of your potential. That guy could exist, or 70% of that guy could exist. And the decisions that you make right now and in the next couple of years are going to determine which one shows up. So I highly recommend you guys think about that and take massive action. If you guys have not gotten your labs done, don't worry. We thank you so much for joining the call. Basically, if you're on this call, there will be a link, I think, in the description, or sorry, in the chat. If you want to get 50% off your labs, I highly recommend you guys go get it checked out, see what's under the hood, see what's going on. It may explain some of the things that you're feeling. And for a lot of people, I think sometimes they feel tired or they don't feel motivated, or that, they're like, the bedroom life is not what it was, or, dude, why can I not sleep through the night, or whatever it is. And there may be something going on internally, and you may think that it's something environmental, like, oh yeah, man, it's because my bed sheets or this and that. It's like, dude, it could be because your hormones are off balance. Why am I not be able to put on muscle? Why am I not able to lose weight? All of those things. Some of those questions can be answered by getting labs. So I highly recommend that you do that. I want to thank Blokes and Joy for allowing me to speak. And if I could give you guys a piece of advice, this is an opportunity. The opportunity to get checked and figure out what's going on. Don't let it pass you by. All right. You don't want to be the guy 5 years from now, 10 years from now, looking back, wishing that this guy had taken care of himself. But yeah, at this time, I want to kind of open it up for Eric and Wes. Any of you guys in the comments, feel free to just shoot out questions. It could be questions about training, questions about optimization. Wes is a wealth of knowledge about that, and or questions for me. Anything you guys like. So go ahead and let her rip, and we'll answer questions as best as we can.
Thanks, Josh. Eric, do you want to go? You want me?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I resonate with a lot of what you said. Compounding consistencies and not just occasionally being um, Superman. It's literally just day in and day out. And I found that it's not what you're doing sometimes, it's what you say no to. So you can just focus on, your things. And I think at a lot of points in your life, Josh, you raised your ceiling based on who you were around. And I've definitely done that throughout my years. When I was living in Syracuse, New York, I was competing in Ironman, made it to Kona, thought that I was just at the top of the food chain. And then I move out here to Colorado. And this morning I went mountain biking with Tim O'Donnell, who's an Ironman world champion. And my friends, like, they all do Leadville, they all do Leadman, they all are CrossFit Games athletes. Like my ceiling has just been raised so much based on my friend group and my environment that I'm in. So I think that's so important. If you feel like you have either reached the ceiling in where you are or who you're around, like finding that next group or finding that next environment that allows you to continue increasing your ceiling. And like you with grades, I had a 2.3 GPA my first semester freshman year. And like I was a good student in high school. I played 3 sports. I had never really failed in anything yet. And my parents were paying for my college education at a SUNY school in upstate New York. And it was the first time where I felt like I both failed myself and I failed my parents. And my problem was I wasn't showing up to classes. I wasn't studying. I was giving 40% because I didn't drink much in high school. So when I got to college, I'm like, oh, wow, this is just a bar with a roof on top of it. I can party every single night and I can just have a blast. So, after that, though, when the outcome was not what I wanted, I, reprioritized and I'm like, all right, I'm going all in on studying. I want to prove to myself that I can do well. I don't want to flunk out and I don't want to disappoint my parents. And from that semester forward, I don't think I got anything below a 3.8 and had multiple 4.0s. And it was just, dedicating myself to this and stripping out this. And I mean, I stopped drinking a really long time ago. I'm almost 45. I stopped drinking when I was in my late 20s. And for me, it wasn't just ripping the Band-Aid off. It was a gradual shift of my friend group was changing, my activities were changing. Instead of looking forward to partying on a Friday night, I was looking forward to that 6:30 a.m. bike ride I was going on with everyone because I wanted to complete a half Ironman, and then I wanted to complete a full Ironman, and then I wanted to get to the Ironman World Championships. And, as that evolved, like drinking no longer had a place in my
Totally.
life.
Yeah.
And I think it's super important. It's tough to just stop doing something that is part of your life and it's
Yeah.
part of your structure. It's much easier if you can figure out what to replace it with. And that's what I did. I replaced it with this newfound structure of exercising twice a day,
Totally.
these new friends that were pushing themselves, entrepreneurship. And I think that was a really important lesson for me is it's tough to stop something if you don't find something else to like dive into. And I think that's why you find a lot of elite athletes, especially endurance athletes, oftentimes they were drug addicts or, they were alcoholics and
Yeah.
they found this new outlet to dedicate their time to and to go 100% into.
Absolutely. No, man, totally. Yeah, I resonate with all that. That's great for sure. Um, yeah. Is there here, I got a couple questions here. I'll kick it to some of the questions here. Um, let's see. Okay, at what range this one's a good one for Wes. Wes, at what range should you start TRT?
Yeah, great question. So I would say, and this is going to come from a lot of anecdotal evidence too. There's research on this stuff out there too. There's a lot of older research though that is probably behind the times of what we're doing now. So we're more at the forefront innovating a lot of this. There's not a perfect set range, but what you want to look at is I'll typically see majority of men coming in around 400s to 800s standard, kind of where they're at. This is with no HRT replacement or anything like that. So that's commonly what I'll see in that range. And this can be in ages from 20s to 40s. When you start seeing symptoms and signs of decline, whether you're sitting at 5, 6, 700 of a testosterone, like these are treatable ranges. So what I've seen a lot of, and it's kind of disappointing, is that I see a lot of people coming from primary care who haven't been listened to.
Mhm.
So primary care is so far behind what we're doing. And even if you look at a lot of endocrinology clinics, like they're so far behind what we're doing and looking at that they're not even looking at people's testosterone. They're not even touching on this.
Yeah.
So I've treated people at levels at 5, 6, 7, 800 before. And you have to look at free testosterone too, which a lot of clinics won't do. You'll look at total. We have issues with higher sex hormone binding globulin. So SHBG is one of your main transporters or binders onto testosterone that your liver produces. Men's and women's livers both they both produce this. Now the problem is if this is too high, you can have a low free testosterone. And so you could be 6, 7, 800, 1,000 all day on total testosterone, but still struggle and have these symptoms. And a lot of times people apply these to just erectile dysfunction, but you're looking at things with brain fog, low motivation, depression, anxiety. And I have tons of people coming to me who are already on psych meds or anti-anxiolytics or all of your Lexapros and these kind of things, SSRIs, SNRIs.
Yeah.
I see this all the time. Um, but yeah, it's disappointing to see that primary care is not more behind this. I've had my own experience with primary care. I worked as a nurse practitioner doing this, and I saw my own primary care probably 5 or 6 years ago who didn't agree with what I was doing at all. So suffice it to say, I stopped seeing him because no one wants to sit in a waiting room for 45 minutes now at a brick and mortar at the hospital or these clinics.
Yeah.
Telehealth is really kind of where it's at, and we're going to be innovative based on your needs. So if you're sitting at 7, 800 but don't feel great, then we're going to look at free testosterone. We're going to look at these other things too. And there's, like you mentioned earlier, there are things that we can do around this that it's not just testosterone related, but I mean, we got to look at thyroid. We have to look at where the liver's functioning at. A big thing you're seeing now too is obviously the progression of type 2 diabetes, earlier dementia, cancers. The younger generation too, we don't want to be like we've seen our grandparents and our parents.
Yeah.
All of us could probably mention at least 1, 2, 3 people who have had cancer in our family or diabetes,
Yeah.
or all these kind of issues. And so just to kind of wrap that back around here, there's no set range for when you should start it, but I would say most guys perform the best between about probably 700 and 1200. It's a great range that we work in.
Okay. I do have a question for Eric and Wes. You feel free to jump in at any time during this. So, Eric, regarding like your lab work or like your kind of optimization and like how do you take that information and prepare for your athletic events based on the feedback given? And like, what are some things that you maybe had not thought like, oh, I need to improve in this department or whatever, but by getting the labs and kind of assessing what's going on, you're able to improve some of your performances.
Yeah, when it comes to athletics, the biggest thing for me is cortisol. So, I don't have the problem of not exercising. I have the problem of exercising way too much. And, obviously sleep and recovery
Yeah.
protocols, all of that is going to come into play with the amount of volume that I do each week, which is upwards of 20 plus hours.
Yeah.
And in my Ironman years, so we're talking 2010 to 2014, towards the end of that, my testosterone, I think, was 380. It was super low, and I was competing at the Ironman World
Yeah.
Championships. You would think I was at the pinnacle of health and wellness,
Yeah.
but my cortisol was so high from overtraining that my testosterone had dipped. And this is notorious in endurance sports where, people are just massively overtraining. So that was my first aha moment with getting labs done. More recently, in the high 500s, usually between 560 and 600 naturally. I haven't done TRT or any of the other different avenues just because it's banned in some of the sports I compete
Right.
in. And I feel good at that level. I still train a little too hard, but I do a lot of different recovery protocols. I do contrast therapy every night, 2 to 3 rounds in a sauna and cold water. I tend to sleep at least 8 hours every single night. I treat sleep like a job. I go to bed around
Yeah.
the same time and wake up around the same time each day. And then I get regular massages and red light therapy. I think all of that is super important. One of the other things that stood out to me, and this is maybe 2 years ago when I did labs with Blokes, was it came back pre-diabetic.
I was just going to ask you that question.
Yeah, yeah. And my issue wasn't the same issue that many endurance athletes have of just like over consuming carbs and sugar in their training and racing. For me, it started really innocent with pouring a little maple syrup on like fruit and nut butter at night when I was snacking before I went to bed. And then it just got to the point where I'm like, all I really like is this maple syrup. I'm just going to start drinking maple syrup out of the jug. So I started drinking quite a bit of maple syrup. And when I got my labs back, I was like, shit, that's not a good habit to continue with. So I had to stop drinking maple syrup and I got it back to normal levels within a couple months. But, that was something that I would not have known had I not had my labs done. And I don't want to end up with diabetes. But there are a lot of endurance athletes now, and probably even strength athletes that are coming back pre-diabetic because they fuel with so much sugar. And to some degree, yeah, you have to perform at that level. But, to what, fault down the road is, are you compromising your later years by doing that? So I do think about a lot of that stuff now. The extremes oftentimes aren't the healthiest. Even if you're an extremely good athlete, that may be too extreme in one direction.
Yeah. Wes, what do you think are the downsides to like living in that space for a prolonged period of time? Like, yes, you're performing at a high level, but like you said, you're pre-diabetic and stuff. What if you would have continued that and not known about it or done anything about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the endocrine system, it's all connected to each other. So you have, I've seen people you start getting that lower testosterone level, higher cortisol levels. This is going to leak over into other things, thyroid, parathyroid. Like you're going to start to see things crop up with these issues. You're even probably going to start to see a lot of inflammation markers because hormones are going to cover for each other for a certain amount of time before they start to fizzle out.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of times I'll see on labs, like you might see what I'll encounter a lot of times is a higher glucose. You'll be over 100 probably on a fasting blood sugar, but your A1C is still going to be in a normal range. So you're going to look at an average glucose over 2 to 3 months. It's still going to be there. Well, it's going to be there and be regular until it's not. The body's great at compensating until it can't. And then you're going to start seeing other issues pop up, whether that's vitamin D is going to be an issue. We're going to see tons of inflammation markers sometimes pop up. And it's not all at the same time. Like you might see CRPs and uric acid levels and these kind of things. Homocysteine, right? It's talked a lot about now because of the issues we're having with converting into our B12 and needing methylfolate and all these kind of things too. But at the same time, we're being poisoned by a lot of food, right? There's just, we have terrible, terrible food sourcing. We all have really bad gut issues too. Mostly because, right, glyphosate, these other sprays, everything they use on this, and then all our highly refined grains and hybridized wheats, and the box foods kind of took over right in the 60s and 70s. So you started seeing this progression down the road, and now you're seeing, type 2 diabetes wasn't a thing until these started coming out and appearing.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing a big shift over here of now, I think in the young generation and a little bit the older generation too, catching on to this, saying we've kind of had enough, right? And so we've got people who, they've stopped purchasing these products. You guys stop drinking alcohol. There's a huge shift that we're seeing in a lot of
Yeah,
this.
I know a lot of young guys that don't drink at all. Like they're not really interested, and they're like 19 years old, that kind of thing. And you're just
The
like,
non-alcoholic beer is kind of taking
dude,
over
yeah,
too.
like I mean, think back to when I was that age. I was like, man, I can't wait till I'm 21, But yeah, it's a nice cultural shift, and I think the visibility of people like Eric, just seeing them, it's like I'd rather be like this guy. Um, and so yeah, Eric, what are for those that are kind of like interested in, either doing a high rocks or, working towards an Ironman or things like that, what's some of the lowest hanging fruit that they can kind of jump onto either nutritionally or, with blood optimization, that kind of stuff that you're like, hey, this is the most common kind of like routine thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the number one thing would be get a heart rate monitor. Just understand what your zones are because both of
Yeah.
those events are very cardiovascular driven. So
Yeah.
you want to be training in the right zone. Kind of like what you said before with your athletic background. Like there's a difference between exercising and training for something. One is purposeful, one is just kind of going through the motions,
Totally.
burning calories. So, what I learned in my Ironman years is that zone two is the bread and butter of your training. You're
Yeah.
doing 80% of your training in that zone so you can build this massive aerobic engine and create oxygen efficiency to your muscles. So, I was doing everything way too hard
Yeah.
and too short when I first got into endurance sports. And I had to learn that I had to back off on intensity. It had to be at a pace that I could back up day in and day out. And that, over time, you build this engine, just like pull-ups. You don't go and
Yeah.
max out every single day. You do, six if you can do 10, and, eventually you'll be doing 14. So it's just backing off to get to a place where you can increase volume. Diet wise, I mean, the biggest thing I track is protein. I just want to make sure that I'm hitting about a gram per pound of body weight. I need to be muscular enough to be able to move weight in a high rocks or CrossFit workouts, but I also want to be, lean enough that I can run fast in the mountains and bike fast in the mountains. So it's kind of a balancing act. So I don't do a ton of carbs for how much I train. I'm probably, I don't know, in the 200 to 300 gram carb range, where many that would train at the volume I train are 600 plus grams of carbs.
Yeah.
I find that my mind works better when I have less carbs, when I'm almost, in a state of ketosis. I
Yeah.
just feel so energized and my mind is so clear. So I don't like foggying it up with lots of carbs. So
Totally.
protein, gram per pound of body weight to, maintain the muscle mass I have. Carbs around my workouts. I do some carbs at night as well, just to help me sleep from all of the training volume. And then, I feel like the biggest overlooked thing is sleep,
Yeah,
dialing
man.
in your sleep. And
Totally. Yeah.
yeah, we live in this society that preaches late night activities, and I get it. Many of us have
Yeah.
9 to 5s, but the more you can do entertaining things throughout the day, the better, rather than relying upon the nighttime to do your entertaining
Yeah.
things and then staying up late, eating like shit at night, and then, getting 4 hours or 5 hours of sleep, and then it affects your next day. And it's just a
Totally.
snowball effect in one direction or the other, whether you're making positive decisions around health and wellness or negative decisions.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned all those, by the way. And by the way, with zone two, it's really interesting because I use that a ton for getting actors ready for film and TV and stuff. And there's this
Yeah.
common misperception where it's just like, hey, if I'm just like lying in a pool of sweat every single day and this and that, like, then I'll get shredded and lose the body. I'm like, I tell people this all the time. I'm like, hey, if really intense metcons got you ripped like that, every bodybuilder that's competing at the Olympia would be doing it all the time. But they're not doing that. They're doing zone two, and they're on the step mill, they're doing incline treadmill walks, stuff like that. So it's super important. And at the same time, for performance, I just watched a thing the other day where Famke Bol, the runner for Denmark, the 400-meter runner, she talked about her training splits, and she does speed work and zone 2.
Yep.
And rarely touches on the actual intensity and duration that she's actually going to be racing. It's just those two ends, and then both, raising both tides will raise the ship in the middle, that kind of thing. But anyway, all right, guys, it has been an hour. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us. Thank you, Wes, for your knowledge and expertise. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Kate, for setting this up. Yeah, I had a blast. And if you guys have any questions, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this will be on the YouTube channel. If it is, you guys can rewatch it. Feel free to go ahead and comment on that. Give it a like, subscribe, all that stuff. If you have questions that didn't get answered, go ahead and write those in the comments. We'll go back and answer those for you. But yeah, thank you to everybody that joined us. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one.
See you guys.
All right.
Bye.